Let me ask you a question. Did you see me, or did you see my wheelchair first? And would it define who I am? My wheelchair is like a visible sign. You can't avoid seeing it. You see, I know the difference between being anonymous and sometimes feeling like public property because I've used a wheelchair now for the last 10 years. So what does that look like in practice, you may say? What are my daily interactions like? Well, I would like to give you a glimpse of my world before and after using the wheelchair. I would like to open the door for you to two worlds. Firstly, people now ask me, do you work? Whereas before it was, what do you do? There is a low expectation. How would you feel if people push you around without asking, speak on your behalf, or speak to your friend instead of you? To me, it sometimes feels like I'm less than other people. What would you think if your old boss didn't ask you about your future aspirations in the company anymore, and he said to you, if he employed everyone with your disability, the business would collapse? Would that kill your confidence too? The thing is, in so many ways, I'm still the same person. I'm vocal, I'm passionate, I'm ambitious, and sociable. And what I've had to deal with is undoubtedly challenges and setbacks. And I've had to adjust to the world. Now, I don't know if you realise, but we're not just talking sticks and wheelchairs here, because disabled people make up the largest minority group in the world, both visible and non-visible disabilities. And in fact, a recent US survey stated that 78% of people with disabilities do not have a wheelchair. They do not have a visible tell showing their disability. But I don't know if you noticed, when we talk about diversity, disability is rarely mentioned, if at all. It's as if disabled people are such a distinct group of people, not part of the mainstream, and therefore not fully included in society. You see, I use a wheelchair now, and people look at me differently. But what I've realised is that I also have a different lens. We all have a lens in the way that we see the world. So let me give you some examples. I want to start off with what we think of as normal. So if you think back, think about your fairy tales that you read as children. Let's have a look at how disability is depicted. If we take Beauty and the Beast and the Hunchback of Notre Dame as examples. So in Beauty and the Beast, there's an arrogant young prince, and he falls under a spell as punishment for bad behaviour. And we are told he's turned into a hideous beast until he learns how to love and be loved in return. Now, what message does that send? That if you have some kind of facial disfigurement, that's associated with punishment and bad behaviour, and being beautiful is associated with happiness and love. Now, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, it's about Quasimodo. Now, Quasimodo lives a life of solitude because we are told he is too ugly to be accepted in society. He falls in love with the main female character, but she falls in love with somebody else, which he accepts, and he gives them his blessing. Again, what message does that send to children and society? That disabled people live in isolation because they are too unattractive. And love is not for them, but it's for others. But they are accepting of this, realising their lot in life. Now you might be thinking, yeah, but these are just old fairy tales. They're make-believe. It doesn't do any harm to society and children. But I believe it starts from somewhere. You see, this affects me too. I've had people say to me, oh, you're quite pretty for someone in a wheelchair. But once, a mother, I overheard her, and she said to her young child, within earshot of me, see, you're lucky because you can walk. Now, I don't disagree, we have to be grateful for what we have in our lives, don't we? We have to appreciate what we have. But to say that comment in front of me and to her child, it just made me feel that my life had less value and worth. And this is the current day fairy tale, which is being perpetuated about people with disabilities. Now, you might think they're just old fairy tales, but let's look at Hollywood. Let's look at films and how they look at disability. So we've all seen James Bond, right? So let's think about the villains. Because if you think about it, most of them were disabled. From the relatively subtle third nipple to a range of facial scarring. Do you all remember Jaws? Yeah? I mean, these characters, they were bad. They were scary. But they were disabled. Now, modern day films, they tend to look at disabled people as objects of pity. And their disability is all-consuming. It is the main point of the story being told in the first place. For example, there's Will in Me Before You, who's paralysed. He decides to end his life because he feels it's not worth living. Again, you might think, yeah, but that's Hollywood. Everybody knows it's not real. But I believe that these messages plant seeds in our subconscious and conscious minds. The big deal is this, is that my interactions with strangers, from the silly comments to the awkward ones and the well-meaning ones, they all come from what we see and what we hear. My interactions with strangers are largely about the chair. You got a license for that? Oh, God, women drivers, don't drink and drive. Oh, don't run over my toes. Oh, do you need help? Are you okay? You're so inspirational. You're really brave being out. Is this really about me? How would you feel if that became your identity? You see, these are phrases that I and millions of disabled people hear on a daily basis because the stories about us are not by us. They are a narrow vision of what life is actually like for someone living with a disability. Yes, my life is shaped a lot by the fact that I use a wheelchair. I can't dispute that. But the thing is, it is not the main story. It's just part of my story. Why can't we now see films about people and their disability is just part of the story? Why? Because this will normalize disability. The way you can build a bridge and to make disabled people feel included, you can reach out to similarities or you can tune in to the differences. You can say, "How are you?" instead of, "What happened to you?" Because it's a choice. You can change your lens today. The next time you encounter somebody with a disability, you can think about what is possible. You can think about what insights do they have that you probably don't. You see, the funny thing is, most of the time, I don't feel disabled. Most of the time, I don't feel different. But when I do, it's when society is organized in a certain way. It's when people react differently towards me, more than the impairment itself. But when the barriers are removed, I feel included, I feel accepted within society. I don't need people to constantly commentate on the way I move around now. I don't need people to fuss around me. I have a disability, but that does not mean inability. And I get it. It's hard sometimes, isn't it? If you don't have experience of disability, what do you say? What do you do? Do you help? Do you not? But this is what works for me. This is my body. This is my new normal. I do this every single day. If I need assistance, trust me, I'll ask you, I'll guide you. Because here's the thing, is that no matter what's happened in your life, whether it's visible or non-visible, abuse, cancer, a bereavement, or even a difficult breakup, it's not what's happened to you, it's your interpretation of what's happened to you that will enable you to build your own bridge to get to the other side of what is possible. Thank you.